I see my work and I see my practice as the same thing. It's seamless. One begets the other. And when I'm practicing, I see it as an offering, and when I'm working, I see it as an offering. So something that's new, something that has changed in my work, as well as in my practice, is that when I first started doing practice within the context of Tibetan Buddhism, I really wanted to offer all the best of me, everything that I could think of that was beautiful and peaceful and wise, and I wanted to do that with the work as well. And I think I've always had a tendency with my work to really make things that are finished and clean and beautiful with no rough edges. And how that's changed through the practice is that I've realized that there's a lot of rough edges that exist not only within myself but within the work. And instead of ignoring them and pushing them away, you know, they've started to surface, and I haven't been able to ignore them because the practice brings things to the surface. And so at this point in my work and in my life, I feel like what I'm offering is wrathful as well as peaceful. I've realized that it's okay for me to offer all the things that I didn't want to show and I didn't want to talk about. And it forces me to look at them, but it also forces me to accept them and realize that they're just two sides of the same coin. And I have just as much wrath as I have peace. And, you know, in the exploratory process, I'm much more able to create a level of destruction with the work that makes room for new space and new work, and to really look at those spaces in between what's dark and what's light and what's wrathful and what's compassionate, and is it the same thing? Because ultimately it is.
I was touched by a documentary film, Man on Wire, about a man who had a passion for tightrope walking, and his most inspiring moment was walking across the high wire strung between the Twin Towers in New York. And in the interview he said he never forget a first step onto the tightrope. While he was fully concentrated and focused on each step, listening to everything, he was extremely happy. So when I imagine him like totally surrendering his life and his body to the situation and being fully conscious of the moment, I think he might be in a state of mind like that many Buddhists seek to attain. Tibetan Buddhism approach to self-transformation and the science of social healing is based on the practice of mind training known as Rojong. So I pursued the insights of this mind training to weave into my video artwork. So I try to develop my practice of meditation to deepen the awareness of the moment and cleanse the accumulated memory from the past, and then manifest this practice into my video art. So through the elements of video, sculpture, and performance, the viewer sees a performer meditating, and sculpture made out of human hair may gradually disappear or seem to float away from the body, it presents invisible thoughts, mind, and ego being let go.
A language or a poetic phrase like to be or not to be, right? Famous Shakespeare. He said those words and we associate them with Shakespeare, but at the same time those words are like a cup that's holding the meaning. So what's the meaning of those words? It's about life and death, right? But life and death is not Shakespeare's own he doesn't own life and death. So in the same way, in Buddhism they say, trust the meaning, not the words, right? Trust the teaching, not the teacher, and all that kind of stuff. So I think poetry is the same. I'm using language, or I try to, as a way to get people to get into like a state of poetry, a state of dreaming, a state of like, just take them out of their ordinary life. So if they see Greek or Tibetan or some other text, then they're confronted with their own ignorance. Poetry is like a state of mind, a state of being. It's like a state of beauty, a state of grace or something. So there can be an experience of poetry that you have in front of a painting or a sculpture, or you can have an experience of poetry when you're reading an actual poem, or when you're reading a novel, you can have an experience of poetry. So the way I'm looking at it is like, poetry is this a little bit maybe broader scope than just the metrical organization of words that's poetry. Relating to Buddhism and painting, because Buddhism says that phenomena is like a fabric of light. Painting is all about that, 100%. It's a fabric of light. Painting says phenomena is a fabric of light. That the truth of painting is that it shows that our landscapes and our bodies and everything else is like this kind of like smoky illusion made out of like little splashes of color that somebody just sort of slapped together. Buddhism is saying what you see and what you experience is an illusion.
I try not to kind of create the idea, just like by forcing and pushing myself to, get something. I try to be always neutral, which is like kind of like a kind of meditation like states or something. Just like very. I just kind of wait for getting the idea just comes up, right? And it's just, I have no idea where it comes from, but it's like kind of maybe a dream, like what you said, death, so in a dream you have no control, just like dreams comes from your mind, right? And then, maybe after you wake up and you can analyze, what's the dream and meaning and stuff, right? But then sometimes you can see some similarity, or you can see some kind of, just the style, like I don't know, the meaning. What I'm saying for this ideas for the painting is like, it's not like that. It's in a way, I said unconscious, but just like consciously using unconscious side, which doesn't, it's kind of paradox.
My first teaching from my teachers was about compassion, Omani Peme Hung, and I received an empowerment on that mantra and the teachings of Avalokiteshvara and compassion. And then I found this ring, and so it was sort of a reinforcement, and it made me think, oh, there's something mysterious here in this tradition. So it kind of like brought in the teachings in my heart. My practice is related to my practice in the hospital. And so I'm working with bodies, and I'm working in intensive care. So I'm working with patients who are sometimes half alive and sometimes very alive, but sometimes in between altered states. I think that's why I use a lot of bodies, and I have those organic shapes because I'm dealing with the body so much. I had a friend ask me to paint a flower for him, a good friend, and that was like 10 years ago, and then I am a little obsessive. And then I did one and I liked it, so then I just did all flowers. So the combination of having painted in the flowers and then working with bodies, then the two come together in the work. But I've recently tried to go away, like just from painting the flower, because when I was painting it, I was thinking I wasn't actually painting a flower. I was painting in an abstract way. In painting, it's more about like the emptiness side of the compassion. So working is like the active side, and then the painting is more the other side of the Omani Peme Hung, like the emptiness, like the still, the quiet. The longer I work, the more concentrated and focused I get, and then the more I'm in a sort of state of concentration, and then I go kind of lose sense of being me and valley, and then I just like present with the painting.